So what does a typical grant look like? Most grants these days have got a series of questions and you've generally got a word limit or a character limit that you've got to work in. When a grant comes out, you generally get about 4 weeks to complete that grant and submit it. So it's really, really important not to start the grant the day it comes out, but to start it now, so when the grant does come out, you're ready. Probably on the day that grants get released, I'll get half a dozen calls saying that people want to apply. And unfortunately, because they need council approval or quotes or plans, it's too late. So always get yourself ready now for when grants do come out. The grant will ask you to attach cost estimates, evidence of your co-contribution, how the project aligns to government objectives. The grant may ask you to provide some final financial year forecasts for the next 3 or 4 years. For big projects, it might ask for an economic analysis. And often you'll get asked to attach a business case if you've got one, a project plan, marketing plan, building plans and letter of supports. And most grants these days have got a lot of applicants. The Office of Rec and Sport grants that were announced a few weeks ago had 171 applications, 34 were successful. So it's pretty competitive. Everyone's in there trying to get the grant. 1 in 5 is the normal number. For everyone they grant, 4 or 5 miss out. So addressing the criteria, make sure when you get the grant you go through the guidelines and you've really got to make sure you're aligned to the government department criteria. Really, really important. I'll just show you a little trick in a moment of how we do that. Most grants, even the PIRSA grants or Office of Rec and Sport grants, they want to know what are the economic benefits. How many jobs is this going to create directly or indirectly? How much economic stimulus is this going to have? Most grants will have a target market, whether that's the community at large, a sports group, a gender group, or kids, etc. There'll always be a target market. They'll want to know how you're going to market the project. Government is really worried that they'll give you $1 million, you'll build a new toilets or something like that, or part of a community centre, upgrade it, and it won't get used. So marketing the project and proving how you market is really important. That it's going to be sustainable long term, so it's one thing getting the grant, but then you've got to make sure you can run that community centre for the next 10 years and it can stand on its own 2 feet. So sustainability is really important, how it's going to impact the environment, how you're going to connect to the community, and is it a catalyst for future investment? So if we build a new factory here in Penola, are we going to get lots of new businesses coming along? So will it stimulate further activity? They'll also often ask you if you don't get the grant, will the project proceed? Because they just want to see where you are financially and how that comes together. So that alignment to department or project objectives, if there's one thing you do with the grant, no one does this, but this is one thing you can do, and this should be the page right at the front of your application. Just imagine you've got an A4 sheet of paper like this. On the left-hand side, this is the Office of Rec and Sport. This is just part of the form. Put the criteria on the left-hand side. So the Office of Rec and Sport want to know what the project need is. That's 25%. What the participation and utilisation will be, 25%. Quality infrastructure, 20. Strategic justification, 10. And there was a couple more. So that's the criteria by the Office of Rec and Sport. Then on the right-hand side, what you do is put how your project aligns to the merit criteria. So really, really important. So whether you're applying for a grant or whether you're sitting in front of a minister, the first thing they say is, how does this grant align to our criteria? Bang, you can just show them on one page. Your whole grant proposition should be on one page. And that's the first attachment you put, or if you're doing a business case, it's right up front. Has everyone heard the term shovel ready? So at the moment, PIRSA's got 2 grants. They've got a planning grant and they've got another grant which is construction, or you can apply for it if you're shovel ready. Shovel ready means you've got your quotes, your council approvals done, you've got your business case if that's relevant. You're ready to break ground basically. And a lot of grants want you to be shovel ready. If you're not, you get knocked out pretty quickly. Business cases. We always suggest that if you've got a project that costs more than $500,000, you should have a business case. So if you've got a project and it costs more than $500,000, a lot of grants will ask you to attach your business case Even if they don't, we suggest you should have a business case. $500,000, you're starting to get into big money. You're asking government departments to fund a major project. They want to see what the business case is for. That should be something that's attached to every grant application, but it's also a document that you can use to speak to investors about, to speak to government departments about, all those sorts of things. So it's not just for grants, it's a good business discipline to do that. It really shows that you've thought through the project and you've got all the evidence. So what does a successful grant look like? First thing, making sure that your objectives or outcomes align with the merit criteria, like we showed in that previous slide, really important. Making sure that you respond to the questions and you're really specific. Most grants have a word or character limit, so 400 words means you haven't got a lot of room to waffle. You've got to get to the point quickly and state your case quickly. You can't digress. You might say, I'm going to put a little bit more and I'm going to put the rest in appendices. That's fine, but that grant application that'll decide whether the evaluator reads the appendices and goes into them in great depth. Evidence, that's a really key word. In all grants these days, you can't just say, this is going to create 20 jobs or 5 jobs or 1 job. You have to show evidence of how it's going to create those jobs. Any evidence or stats or facts and figures that you might have are really important. Number 5, the requested amount is proportionate to outcomes and benefits. It's really important. We see a lot of grants where people want to apply, it's an economic stimulus grant, people want to apply for $5 million and they're going to create 1 job. It's not going to really cut the mark. You've got to, the amount you're asking for should be proportionate to the benefits, economic, social, environmental, that the project's going to give you. Make sure that the application is exciting and visual. All our business cases, we use lots of artwork, lots of colour, photography, etc. As I said, the evaluator, he or she may read 10 of these a day and 9 of them will be white paper with black text. It sounds pretty simple, but bring the application to life. Make sure you stand out, and that's what we try and do. You've got to make sure these days that your grant is not subject or conditional. Applying for an Office of Rec and Sport grant for say $300,000 to build new change rooms and then saying if we get the grant we'll go and apply to a bank, it's got to be the other way around. You've got to have the money first, or it can't be conditional. It's not if we get the grant we'll do this, it's got to be the other way around. We've got all these things, now we want the grant. You won't get the grant if it's subject to finance and all those sorts of things. Make sure you involve your key stakeholders, whether that's First Nations people, the local community, the local schools, and get letters of support from local stakeholders as well. Again, most grants, there'll be a question in there, what stakeholder engagement have you undertaken? So if you can show agendas, minutes, emails, letters of engagement that you've had with the community, that'll be a really good thing. Risk is an important thing. Think about the project. If it's got numerous risks, you'll probably find it's a pretty hard project to get across the line. Government especially don't want to involve themselves in projects that show a high level of risk for obvious reasons. But if you do have a project with lots of risks, make sure you've got a risk register and you've got mitigation strategies against those risks, so you've addressed them. Really important. That one's really important. 90% of all grant applications get submitted on the last day, and believe me, you always have problems with portals. Things don't load, things crash. Don't ever leave it to the last day. If you can, submit a week or 2 early, because when your application goes in, you'll find that the department, out of curiosity, wants to start to see what levels of applications they're getting through. They might take the time to have a look at yours, and yours will stand out. You don't want to be one of 100 on the last day. And if you've got any problems, you won't have any. It'll be just too hard to contact the department. They'll be that rushed off their feet. So don't leave it to the last day, whatever you do. So what are the resources that you need to apply for grants? You really need a coordinator, and that's not a person who's an expert in grant writing. It could be, but more important, someone who can bring it all together. So someone who's coordinating all the information, who's that point of call, who can distribute the guidelines to everyone. That person doesn't necessarily need to be the person that writes the whole grant application, because they may not be experts in that subject matter. We often get asked to help to write grants in the marine sector or science sector, and we're not experts. So we spend a lot of time with the client trying to understand the project from their point of view, not the coordinators, but from the people at the coalface who understand that project intimately. Always keep a list of projects that you want to apply for funding for. Just as an example, when a new grant comes out that week, I'll often get phone calls saying, we want to apply for that grant. And I'll say, what's the project? And they say, we haven't got one yet. So they see it as people sometimes see it as an opportunity to get some money. But it's project first, then grant, not the other way around. Don't be excited because a new grant comes out. Have a list of your capital projects, make sure you're shovel ready, and then see what opportunities there are for grant funding as you move forward. Making sure you've got input from your finance person or your treasurer. All grants ask you to submit budgets, quotes, financial forecasts, so you'll need someone with some financial experience to help you there. Making sure that you've got your plans from architects and engineers, really important. Quotes from builders or other professionals, lawyers, engineers, etc. You may need to attach an economic analysis from council or the RDAs. All the RDAs have access to tools to do economic analysis. So you might want to do one yourself and you might think, oh, we can't afford that, we've got a quote for $20,000 to do an economic analysis. If you speak to your RDAs, Eyre Peninsula, Far North, etc., they have RemPlan and ID Community, they can do that for free. So say you've got a project, we're building a new community centre and it's $5 million. So what we'll do an economic analysis on the $5 million. So we will say that there's going to be $5 million spent on the project and it's going to happen over a year. It's going to take a year to construct. The economic analysis tool will look at what additional money will by spending that $5 million, how much value add or gross regional product will the project add to the community. So by spending $5 million directly, indirectly we'll generate another $1 million in activity at the hardware store where we buy materials, at the fish and chip shop where the workers go and buy something for lunch, etc., etc. So it's an analysis on that capital spend. Now, most people do the analysis just on the spend, but you can also do it on the income that site's going to generate annually. So let's say the tuck shop or memberships are going to generate another $500,000 annually. You can do an economic analysis to say that $500,000 is going to generate 3 jobs and an extra $50,000 in gross regional product. You can do both, and everyone's got access to that, and it's free. Making sure that if the project requires community consultation, you've done that and you've engaged with the different groups, whether that's elderly people, First Nations, people with disability and so on. Letters of support from MPs and local members are really important. I'll touch on that. When you get ask your local member or your Member of Parliament for a letter of support, or the Minister for that portfolio, get a letter of support. Don't email and thank them. Lodge the application first. In a week's time, email the MP, thank them for their letter, and let them know that you've submitted the application and this is the application number. That way, if they're in Parliament House and they happen to run past the minister responsible for that grant, they can say, hey, we put that application in, it's numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's by the OCA. They can look out for it, they know, they can talk about that grant application, they know the exact reference number and so on. So really important to let your MP know once you've submitted it and what the application number is. So tips and tricks: assume the person assessing the grant knows nothing about your project. Assume the assessor knows nothing about where you're from or nothing about the project. Put them in the picture quickly, tell them who you are, where you're from, what the project's about, so they can build some familiarity instantly. The second point in terms of grant applications, make sure you stand out from the crowd, whether it's being very visual or some other way. There's 150 people applying for this grant. We know 1 in 5 are going to get it. How are we going to differentiate our application? So always complete your application in Word. Make sure you do all your responses in Word. That way you can cut, paste and do a word count. When you bring it across to the portal, you can do things like uppercase. So most portals won't let you format with different fonts and styles and that, but you can do, so if you're answering a question and the character limit for that question, the word limit's 400 words, that first sentence of 20 words should be uppercase and should be a response to the grant. The rest is the detail. So by reading that one sentence that's in capitals, I know what the response is. You can do things like bullet points. You can do things like numbered lists. You can't do much, but you can do a few things to stand out. And remember, everyone else has got that same problem. So you're not any different, but you can do a couple of things. Because we've got word limits and character limits, it's quite acceptable to de-word things, remove A's and D's, not use full stops, not say South Australia, SA, or not say Australia. So if you're running over words, you can abbreviate and you can de-word some of those unimportant words, if you like. It's quite acceptable. Really, really good thing if you can, ring, when a grant comes out and you've got your project, ring the department if you're able to, tell them about your project and get a sense for what they think. I reckon with every grant applications that come up, probably 20% get knocked out within the first half hour because they weren't eligible. And they could have spent $5,000 and 100 hours putting that together. So really important to check your eligibility and just bounce the grant off the department just to get a sense of whether, I think you'll sense it in the tone and that whether you think you've got a chance. But there's nothing worse than doing it and then being told, hey, you're not eligible, and you've just spent all that time and money. This number 10 is an important one. A lot of grants ask for a financial contribution. So let's say that it asks for 50% contribution. The project's worth $1 million. You've got to contribute 500. Government will contribute 500. If you can up your 50% to 55, it's an extra tick. You move up the rung. Everyone else is going to be applying for 50%. You stand out because you're contributing 55% because you've got the capacity and because you want the money to be spread as far and wide amongst other applicants as possible. If that's a possibility, think about it. So once you've got the grant, grants are a lot of work, they take a lot of time, but even once you've got the grant, you're all happy, you're on cloud nine, you can proceed with the project. Bear in mind there's still a lot of work to do. The funding body will want reports and acquittals on a regular basis. They'll want to see invoices and evidence of work being done. They'll probably want to come out and have a look at the project. They'll have their own PR team that wants to do a story and photography. So it's a great day when you get a grant, but there's still a lot of work after that. So just bear that in mind of how especially community-based organisations and how they can manage that. There are less grants these days, so we've got to get more creative in terms of how we fund our projects. If we just forget the word grants for a moment and think about funding strategies. So I've sat down with a lot of projects and people have said to me, I need a grant to make this happen. And then we do the numbers and this and that and we think, well, actually you don't need a grant. You could get going right away. If you wait for a grant, it could take a year or two. You can activate this now. And by managing your cash flow, there's some real benefits. Grants are one part of your funding strategy. Are there other things you could be doing? If you're a sports organisation, could your members contribute to the, to the amount being required? Don't just think about grants, think about what other opportunities. So all as I'm saying here is, think about the opportunities. It's not just about grants. Grants is one part of funding strategies. There might be other ways to fund your projects, and don't always wait for the grant. Get your business case together if it's a big project, or get your information together. Go and see your local MP, see your mayor, etc., etc. Talk to them about the project. Make them aware of it, because otherwise they can't help you. So make sure people are aware of your project. So bringing it all together, really important points. Make sure you're ready to apply for a grant. Don't start the day that grant comes out. It'll be too late. Get a project team up and running. Don't just leave it to the coordinator. He or she's not an expert in their field. They'll bring it all together, but they'll need your help. Make sure if you're applying for construction, the project's shovel ready. People often say, are you shovel ready? Yep. And then a minute later, but we've got to get council approval. You're not shovel ready. Number 4, submit the application before the due date. try and get yours in a bit earlier. You're not competing on the last day. If things fall over, you run into trouble, but also let the funding body see what type of application you're putting in because you've submitted it early. If you don't get the grant, always ask for feedback. And there's times we don't get grants, we get the feedback, and then when I apply a second time, I go out of my way to tell them that I've addressed all the feedback that they've given me. So always get feedback. Have a look at you'd always get a list of who the successful applicants were. Have a look at that list and just ask yourself, how were we different? If they were all new change rooms for sports clubs and we're applying for irrigation, maybe the theme or political priority at that time was around change rooms or what have you. It wasn't around, watering the green, basically. It's always good to have a look at who got the money and ask yourself, well, why did they get that money? Why was their project better than ours? We use the term project attractiveness. Is it one of those projects where the MPs are going to stand up and get their photo taken and it's in a marginal seat and it's going to have lots of supporters, or is it one of those ones in the dark back streets and no one's ever going to see it? So project attractiveness, I know it's all about need, growth and that, but sometimes the attractiveness of the project is really important. But have a look at those successful ones for the last few years, absolutely. Check your grant. I can't stress that enough. The evaluator will spend 10 to 12 minutes reading. If he or she reads that it's $1 million on page 1, it's $980,000 on page 2, and it's $1.1 million on page 7, you've lost all credibility, you've blown it out of the water. Make sure you check it and get someone else to check it and just keep checking. And the hard part is making sure that the grant application and those 10 to 12 attachments all say the same thing. So make sure whatever you change in the application, you then change in all the appendices. And that can be a bit, it's simple, but it's overwhelming and can get a bit daunting when you've got so much on at the moment. And look, you don't get all the grants, give it a go, put your best foot forward. Most grants are competitive, so you're competing with the guys down the road and the people up around the corner. Give it your best shot, get feedback if you don't get it, and try again.